introducing into the Parliament in what is effectively an emergency session in order to pass much-needed legislative change in New South Wales to keep the people of this state safe and to take decisive action in the wake of that terrible terrorist incident last Sunday. Today we're introducing new laws, tough new laws, to protect the community, to crack down on hate and strengthen public safety. The legislation bans the public displays of terrorist symbols, outlaws violence, incitement to violence in New South Wales, and gives police stronger powers during public assemblies. It also delivers the toughest firearm reforms in the country. It does restrict access to high-risk weapons, strengthening licence, storage and oversight regimes in the state. I know that this legislative change will be met with opposition both on the floor of Parliament and in the community. On many of the measures that we're proposing, I've heard members of the public say that we've gone too far, but I strongly believe that these changes to law and legislation in New South Wales are fundamentally important to keep the people of this state safe. We can't pretend that the world is the same as it was before that terrorist incident on Sunday. Things need to change in New South Wales. And as a result, we are making and taking extraordinary measures in relation to public assemblies during a terrorism event. That's in recognition of the fact that while maybe a tinderbox out there in the community during this summer period, we can't let unrestrained violence or disunity in our community run without a strong police presence. I think the vast majority of people in New South Wales, whilst acknowledging that these are extraordinary measures, are absolutely essential in keeping the people of this state safe. The state's number one priority, and my government's number one priority, is to keep the people of New South Wales safe, and that means making these changes. I also want to stress it's not the end of change and reform in New South Wales. This is a huge burden that we feel on our shoulders, and it will require legislative and further reforms early next year. And part of that will be in relation to hate speech in New South Wales, and the government today will refer to a committee hate speech, changes to hate speech legislation, in particular that phrase that's commonly used around the world, globalise the intifada. You've seen what the consequences of globalising the intifada are. It's the death of 15 innocent people on the beaches of Bondi Beach simply for practising their religion in a peaceful way. I acknowledge that we don't have the same free speech rules that they have in the United States, and I don't make any apologies for that. We have got a responsibility to knit together our community that comes from different races and religions and places from all over the world. But we can do it in a peaceful way because I'm convinced that most Australians want to live together in peace and harmony and have no interest in poking each other, either in malicious, violent ways or even in incitement to violence and hatred and racism in our community. That's why these changes are necessary, and I'm hoping they get bipartisan or multi-partisan support as they travel through the Parliament later today and into tomorrow. I'm going to hand over to the Police Minister.
Thanks so much, Premier. Good morning, everyone. I have just read into the Legislative Assembly our changes that we choose to make in response to what happened in Bondi just 8 days ago. We signed up as a state to the National Firearms Agreement, and as part of that it was to make sure that we have greater oversight, that we have better compliance, and that we ensure that we reduce the number of guns on our streets. Today we have just done that. We are honouring what we have signed up for. And I think on the back of what we know was the worst terrorist attack in this state, in fact the country, then I think that that is so important. And having signed up to that with the national agreement, then we have an obligation to do that. And I have no doubt that this will set the path for the other states to follow as well. You know, removing guns from our street makes our streets safer. We have more than 1.1 million guns in our state. And reducing the number of those, particularly for rec shooters, I think is reasonable. We know that not everybody, or we know that many, are good law-abiding gun licence holders. We know that. But we also have to acknowledge the harm that can be caused by guns, and for that reason we have introduced these legislative reforms. I won't say any more. I'll hand you over to Sarah.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Davis and I have the great honour of being the CEO of the Alana and Madeline Foundation. And as you know, the Alana and Madeline Foundation was established by Walter Mikac, AM, after he lost his wife Nanette and his two daughters Alana and Madeline at the Port Arthur tragedy 29 years ago. And in honour of our origin story and our legacy, we are part of the Australian Gun Safety Alliance. My colleague Stephen Bendel is an Australian gun safety expert and convenes the Australian Gun Safety Alliance. And under the National Firearms Agreement, we are very aware that firearms ownership in Australia is a privilege, but it is a privilege that is utterly conditional upon public safety. And here in Sydney, we lost our public safety. So I'm really pleased to be able to read a statement from Walter Mikac, AM. Unfortunately, he's not able to be here this afternoon, or he would be saying this himself, but this is his message. Today, I commend Premier Minns and the New South Wales Government for acting swiftly and decisively to close critical gaps in our gun laws and for putting community safety first. In the wake of the horrific attack at Bondi Beach, the New South Wales Government has shown that it is prepared to listen and to act in the interests of the whole community. The people of New South Wales expect their gun laws to be as strong as possible, and today the Minns government has taken important steps to meet that responsibility. I also acknowledge the announcement from the Honourable Kelly Sloan and the Liberals and thank them for their support of these measures, and I urge others to do the same. Like all Australians, my heart is with the families of the victims, the survivors, and Australia's Jewish community. I stand in love and in solidarity with all those affected by this unspeakable violence. I know the lifelong cost of violence and loss. I welcome the Minns government actions today, and I will continue to support all efforts to ensure our gun laws remain safe and strong. And together we must all continue working to build a better future where all our communities are free from violence and free from hate. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Just before we take questions, I also want to report that earlier today, New South Wales Police arrested a 20-year-old male for using a carriage service to harass and intimidate in relation to organising a violent protest down at Cronulla Beach. I want to make it absolutely clear that anyone who is interested in whipping up racial hatred or violence or disunity in our community will be smashed by New South Wales Police. There is zero tolerance for it right now. We know temperatures are high. We understand that our community in some cases is a combustible situation, and we will not tolerate anyone trying to incite via the internet or Facebook or social media posts and attempt to bring our communities together in violence. We cannot allow that to happen. I just urge people to listen to the message from the rabbis at last night's memorial event, where they said hate can't beat hate, and this is an opportunity for us to come together. Now, police are on a hair trigger when it comes to this kind of racism and hatred directed against anybody. And racism directed against anybody in our community is in effect directed against everybody, because we're all going to suffer as a result of it. So don't do it. If you know a kid, a family member, a member of the community that's inclined to jump on the internet and start spewing this racial hatred, understand, or make them understand, that they'll be met with the full force of the law. We can't tolerate it, and we definitely won't after the tragic events of last Sunday. Happy to take questions.
Premier, the 3-year time frame for Sajid Akram to receive his gun licence has been described as inexplicable by people in the industry. It took him a month in 2015 to get it. It took him 3 years in 2020 to get it. What's your understanding of that length of time? Why was there that gap? Was it the investigation of his son by ASIO? Was he rejected and subsequently appealed it? What's your understanding?
Look, Lockie, I'm just not in a position to speculate about it. I understand there's genuine interest in the question. I know people want to get to the bottom of it. It's one of the reasons why we want a comprehensive, independent Royal Commission to understand these circumstances. And I'd hate to be in a situation where I could give you preliminary information that proves to be incorrect. We've got a responsibility to get as much information as we can to all of you and to the public, but we want to make sure it's accurate, and there are still things we don't know.
Have you or your government, though, Premier, asked for details on that 3-year gap?
We've been briefed on that aspect and all aspects of the person in custody and the perpetrator who's been killed, but I'm not trying to be coy. I know the reason you're asking the question. I just want to make sure that anything we give you, particularly in relation to these two individuals, these two perpetrators, is 100% accurate.
I mean, if you've been briefed on the situation specifically relating to Sajid Akram's gun licence, why won't you explain the questions about why he was able to access 6 guns in a short space of time without any red flags being raised, and why it took 3 years between questions?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a fair question, but this is the subject of the inquiry. I mean, I want to give the impression that any of this information isn't important and should be the subject to independent investigation. But right now, I think it's important we take legislative change and legislative action. We need to answer those questions. They're incredibly important, but I don't have them today. Paul.
Going to appoint a Royal Commissioner and release terms of reference, and will that inquiry examine ASIO, AFP and other federal agencies?
The short answer is yes. We need a comprehensive investigation. We need to understand the relationship between our agencies and the Commonwealth, what these two individuals were doing overseas, what information was collected prior to these terrible crimes. So the short answer is yes. In terms of drafting the terms of reference, I need to speak to the Jewish community, our legal experts, and also start to identify who'd be best placed to conduct that Royal Commission. Right now, we want to get these bills through Parliament. That's our immediate focus, but those discussions are not far away. In fact, they're happening in tandem with Parliament.
Will the Commission be focused on the attack or looking at anti-Semitism more broadly?
No, I think it needs to include that. It needs to include the kindling, the fire that spread, that saw so many people being killed. I don't think that it would be... It clearly needs to examine closely the inputs that led to this anti-Semitic act of hate. We know from the information that's already been gleaned that the people who were targeted were at a Jewish religious event down on the beach, just celebrating peacefully their religion on the first day of Hanukkah. What happened in the lead up to that? It's my strong belief that anti-Semitism, racism more generally, starts with words and then it becomes action. So absent an investigation into anti-Semitism, it's not going to make sense. It's not going to be a big piece of the jigsaw puzzle that we need to put together.
This is not politicising a shooting. Many people think this is a knee-jerk reaction rather than actually working out longer-term solutions.
Look, I'd reject that. I think it's really important that we take action in relation to guns, that we take action in relation to reducing the pressure in the community when it comes to the protests that we've seen. I've said this before, that the increasing rhetoric, the ratcheting up of images, often violent images, are having a divisive effect in our community, and we're determined to take action in relation to that. I know people are concerned about issues around the world. I know that there's a deep concern about international events and wars, and that people's passions are heightened, and there's genuine concern about it, and I'm not criticising them for holding those views. What I'm saying is my responsibility is in Sydney right now, and right now we need to make sure that the community is not divided. We do our best, our level best at uniting us.
Akram was granted a gun licence. Premier Akram was granted a gun licence despite living at the same address as someone who was being investigated for terror links. How could this have slipped through the cracks?
I don't know. I'd give anything to go back a week, a month, 2 years to ensure that didn't happen. But we need to make sure that we take steps so that it never happens again.
Premier, can we just get your reaction to the coalition splitting on this bill? The Nationals will vote against this on on the gun reforms. What's your reaction to that? Is that disappointing to you?
Look, I'd prefer every party support the bill, and that we get as much support as possible to show a united front. But I have to give credit to the opposition. I mean, they've worked very hard at making as much of these changes as bipartisan as possible. So I'm not going to criticise anyone. We're going to introduce the bill. We've done it in good faith. We think it's absolutely crucial in terms of keeping the community safe. We're hopeful for support, but the time for knocking each other politically, well, that can wait. Right now, we need to focus on practical changes to make the community safe.
Can you please, in your own words, explain the word intifada?
No, I'm not going to go into the...
And also, why are you banning an Arabic word while at the same time saying that you don't want to whip up fear and racism against certain communities? So can you please explain it? If it's going to be banned, then people need to know what it means.
Yeah, look, I think we understand the meaning of it. The two intifadas in those territories were an uprising, a violent uprising. The circumstances relating to it are specific to the Middle East. I completely acknowledge and accept that. Its use in common parlance in demonstrations both here and around the world are a call to a global intifada. I mean, that's what it means. Not in the Middle East, not in Israel or Gaza, but here in Sydney, in our streets. No, sorry, I think I'm entitled to get an answer out. And in those circumstances, I do believe it leads to a culture and environment of heightened disunity and an invitation to violence. And ultimately, I know that these changes are going to be met with opposition, but I strongly believe that we have to do everything we can to ensure that words that are said at a rally are not used by somebody at a later point for violent retribution on Sydney streets. And that means drawing a line in the sand and saying that this phrase used in this context can lead to violence. I think that in many cases, the organisers of these protests, despite their sincerely held views, are unleashing forces that they can't control. And we need to be in a position to do that.
The link between that...
Sorry, I'm going to keep going.
Mr. Cole's question, have you been given assurances that the New South Wales Royal Commission will be able to probe federal agencies like ASIO and AFP?
Well, we've been offered cooperation from the Commonwealth, but the specifics of it we haven't gone through. But, I mean, you shouldn't take that to believe or have your view that my sense is that we're not going to get cooperation. I think we will. It needs to be broad, and it needs to examine what information other agencies outside New South Wales had, what information they had.
Could you please explain how you got to the number 4 for the cap on the amount of guns an individual can own? Did you seek or receive any advice on how to reach that number?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we drew heavily from Western Australia's leading reforms in relation to the number or the quantity of firearms. They settled on 5, so we knew it would be in that ballpark. We then had consultation with farmers, the agricultural sector, sporting shooters clubs, sporting shooter organisations, and we felt that that number could be wound down one more. And that's how we came to the conclusion. Now, it's not going to be perfect. I acknowledge that. The idea of getting to 0 guns in our community is one that we can't get to. And there's going to be people that need them for legitimate purposes, that sporting shooters or use it for other recreation, but we can make a major step in dramatically reducing the number of firearms in our community. And as you can see from the Alana and Madeline Foundation, they're supporting this. It'll make a big difference in New South Wales. We're the country's biggest state. We're now going to have the toughest gun laws if we get this bill passed, and I think it's hugely important for New South Wales.
There's been concern about recreational hunters keeping guns in the suburbs of Sydney. There are huge numbers of guns stored. Why haven't you moved to try and restrict recreational hunting licences in Sydney?
Well, we have. I mean, it may not... Obviously, the number and quantity of guns have been restricted. There's also been restrictions in relation to NCAT appeals. So for those watching at home, that is if the police commissioner or the authorities decide that someone's unsafe and shouldn't have a gun licence. We're now seeing a situation where that determination is being flipped via administrative decision via an administrative decision, and the guns are kept by the licence holder, well, we're going to extinguish that appeal mechanism, which means that we can collect more information from federal agencies, including ASIO, without divulging that information on the floor of an open court, if you like. So there are many changes. It's not just in relation to the quantity of guns, although that's changing as well.
Firearms limit for farmers, because the Farmers Association says that's unworkable, that it's actually all firearms where they're managing multiple firearms.
Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, they want more. They want a lot more. But we recognise there's a difference between a recreational hunter and someone that needs it for pest control on their farms, and we've made a distinction. Ultimately, we have to make a decision. What's the number? They wanted a lot more than 10. We believe that's reasonable.
James, on raising the buyback, what advice have you received about how many firearms you will need to buy back across the entire state? How much is that going to cost? And the Premier, what are you going to do to pay for that?
So we're in negotiations with the federal government. They have said that they will assist us in that, so we're very pleased that they're cooperating. We're using the experience of Western Australia, which they have about 90,000 firearms in their state, and they've put forward $63 million. As I have said before in press conferences, we believe that will be 3 to 4 times more here in New South Wales. And I have to put together an ERC submission to go to the Treasurer. And so,
what is the ERC submission going to say in terms of money going to put aside? Because we've got 1 million firearms in New South Wales, 100,000 owners, some have 295 guns in Sydney. So how much is it going to cost?
well, we need to work that out, James, to be fair. This is all happening very quickly, and this is very important. We want to consult and we want to make sure we get it right. And it's not a matter of us just picking a number out of the air. We actually have to speak to gun holders, and we will do exactly that, I assure them.
How many were in
90,000
yeah,
guns,
I mean,
63 million.
We've allocated money for it, more than $150 million. We've got matching 50-50 funds from the Commonwealth, so we've got a pool of at least $300 million available as of tomorrow for that buyback. And the numbers that we've arrived on, and I freely accept this has been done quickly, but we're putting these changes to the law in place very quickly, but we believe we've got enough money in place to execute that buyback.
Why should Jewish Australians who live outside New South Wales be relying on an inquiry in this state to work out whether the federal government has done enough to keep them safe? And do you agree with Ed Husick, Mike Freelander and Robert French, who have all said that a federal inquiry would therefore be better?
Well, look, I mean, obviously that's a matter for the Commonwealth, but we are going to ensure that our Royal Commission is comprehensive as possible and has the information available so that we can present a full picture, or as much as we know, as much as we can possibly find out to the people of this state as to what happened. Now, I'm responsible for New South Wales. I'm not going to go anywhere. I'll answer all your questions, but I'm responsible for New South Wales. So in these circumstances, we will make sure it's full and comprehensive as well as being independent. There are challenges though. There's an ongoing, very serious criminal case that will take place alongside any Royal Commission. Now I've pledged to make it run alongside, but we're obviously going to need a very senior jurist who can manage that that dilemma, because in addition to this criminal investigation, the most important thing we can do is deliver justice to the people who've been killed and injured on Sunday, and that means prosecuting the person who's in police custody with these shocking crimes.
Have you personally urged the Prime Minister to consider a national royal commission, and what do you think he's afraid of in refusing to call one?
I mean, my conversations with the Prime Minister are about the future. I mean, the things that we can learn from the past are the things to ensure it doesn't happen again. And I have to say that the federal government's changes to hate speech and hate preachers are wide and incredibly important for New South Wales and Australia. There are big changes coming as a result of that federal legislation. We're going to work with the Commonwealth in relation to those changes. they're going to make a big difference. And what it will mean is that for those that put hate in people's hearts in parts of New South Wales or anywhere across the country, we need to make sure that we are confronting them and closing them down. Because if it happens in the public, if anti-Semitism happens in the public and we can identify it and we can call it out, and if they've broken the law, we can charge them with crimes, we also have to make sure we're confronting anti-Semitism and hate speech where we can't see it, behind closed doors. And the PM's announcement in relation to hate speech and hate preachers is very important for our country, and one that we will be getting behind 100% to confront that kind of evil right throughout our state. It needs to be confronted.
You asked him to call a royal commission. The question was whether you've personally asked him to call a royal commission.
Just to clarify your earlier comments, so you have been briefed on the 3-year gap. You did say you don't want to share the information here on that briefing because you're worried about maybe saying it incorrectly or getting it wrong. What does that mean? And what do you learn?
Lockie, I understand.
Fair enough. What you learned in that briefing regarding that 3-year gap, did that help the formulation of the gun reforms you're now trying to pass today?
Mate, I've just got a lot on my plate at the moment. We're trying to get this bill through. They're big legislative changes. I understand your question. I just don't want to give out incorrect information at the moment. I understand the interest in the gun licences. I can promise you it's important we get to the bottom of it, but I just can't provide you an update today. Sorry.
His wife doesn't want him to sign it over to the state government. What do you
I can understand why she doesn't want to have anything to do with it.
I just wanted to ask, you keep on mentioning violent imagery. Lots of protests were organised and families, grandmas, and you spoke about this when it was March for Humanity across the Harbour Bridge. You said you saw hundreds of thousands of Sydney-sided, disabled, whatnot, of all ages and backgrounds going out. What is the violent imagery you're referring to, and how can it be in their midst if they're feeling safe?
Well, I mean, the violent imagery that I'm referring to is stuff that I see in Hyde Park. It has consequences in our community. Well, I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of it, but it does have an impact. It does coarsen our conversations here. It can put hate in people's hearts. I mean, we need to have a comprehensive investigation to understand the circumstances, but people shouldn't believe that it's consequence-free. If you do jump on the back of a lorry in Hyde Park and make an inflammatory speech, you don't know what you're unleashing in our community. And I think I said earlier, we don't have the same free speech laws that they have in the United States, but that's the case. It's for a very good reason. It's to protect our community. I understand freedom of speech laws are very important. Of course they are. But you should also have the freedom to enjoy a city free from intimidation and violence, from racism, from people yelling at you in the street. It's a big challenge ahead of us. I don't have all the answers, and the legislative changes that we're proposing today are not the full suite of measures. But that's the challenge. I mean, we can identify what the problem is, and then we have to take steps to confront it. The last one.
For the Prime Minister to get booed at last night's memorial.
Well, look, passions are inflamed. I mean, the community is burying its dead, and I just want to make the point that I've been confronted by families who've said to me, we want answers, and have been incredibly angry with me and my colleagues about what happened on Sunday, and I understand it. They've got every right to tell me exactly what they need and what they want, what they demand from the government. They want answers as to what happened, and we've got to take it on the chin as political leaders. That's our job. I will say that our responsibility now is for tomorrow, and I can promise the public, the people of New South Wales, that we will work with the Commonwealth Government on making changes that we believe will make Australia safe and New South Wales safe. I think, as I said earlier in the press conference, it hasn't got a lot of media coverage, but the PM's changes to hate preachers in our community will make a big difference. And it'll be a sea change for us, because for the first time, I mean, there's an acknowledgement from me, from everybody, that we can't let preachers of hate unleash demons in our community that we can't control.
Has the Prime Minister failed them?
All right, last one, yes.
Premier, Palestine Action Group has said there is no line between their protests and what happened perpetrators at Bondi. So why are we having such strict laws that they say will restrict even the Invasion Day protest on the 26th of January?
And they're entitled to their view, but I don't have to take it as, sacrosanct here. I mean, I don't agree with them. Ultimately, as I've said a number of times, I think in some cases ratcheting up the pressure, ratcheting up the rhetoric and the language can unleash forces that you can't control, and it's not necessarily their job to control it, but it is mine. It is my responsibility, because we can't have a repeat of what happened on Sunday or any variation of it. Things are tense at the moment. It's obviously a tinderbox, but we're going to take steps to ensure that we're reducing the pressure in the community, that kind of division, everything from arresting someone that's trying to organise a vigilante rally in Cronulla to ensuring that we're changing the gun laws in New South Wales to keep the community safe, and we've got to keep going. Thanks, everybody.
All right, that's Chris Minns there speaking about the new laws being introduced to the New South Wales Parliament today in light of the Bondi terror attack. They include fast-tracking tougher laws on